Attention, you're listening to the Todd Huff Radio Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk radio. Be advised that the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. Here's your conservative, but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
Well, that is right, my friends. You've tuned in here the day after Easter to this episode of the Todd Huff Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk. I'm your host, Todd Huff. It's a pleasure to be here today, my friends. I want to continue what we were talking about at the end of last hour. Tim Walz's daughter takes to social media to talk about Jesus, how he would be handled if he were living in America with Trump in power in the White House, how he would be deported. Lots of things. I want to get to that. There's a whole bunch of other things in my list in the stack of stuff as well, which you can always view on our website, toddhuffshow.com. Just go to the stack of stuff. That, of course, is a hat tip to the late, great Rush Limbaugh. Before we get started, though, my friends, let me remind you, MyPillow, they have a large order of sheets that were supposed to be taken by the big box stores. You know, these box stores, they hate MyPillow when it comes down to it. They hate what Mike Lindell stands for. They hate anyone that supports Trump. And so they got stuck. MyPillow got stuck with this sheet, this big allotment of sheets. And so they're giving you the opportunity to get wholesale prices on these sheets. These are Giza Dream Sheets, Percale bed sheets as well. These are on deep discount wholesale prices that are available to you. All you have to do is go to mypillow.com. Promo code Todd will get you those special prices, mypillow.com. Promo code Todd. Free shipping is also available. There's free shipping options, I should say. When this allotment is gone, the special discount will be over. mypillow.com. Promo code Todd, or if you prefer, 800-615-2015, 800-615-2015. All right, so let's get back. I'm going to play this again. I played this at the end of last hour. Didn't have as much time to talk about it in the last segment as I would have liked. We're going to cue it up here to talk more about this. Again, this is Tim Walz. You remember Tim Walz. Many people refer to him as Tampon Tim. He was Kamala Harris's running mate in 2024, governor of Minnesota, and his daughter's out there. It's about a minute clip of her on social media saying some things about Jesus, of course, talking about him over the Holy Week, the Good Friday, Easter Sunday, Resurrection Sunday. And so I want to play this. I want to play this for you to hear, and I want to talk a little bit more about this. So here it is. Tim Walz explaining how Jesus and her, viewpoint would be treated by Trump and this administration if he was living in America today in 2025.
If we're alive today and in the United States, this administration would have already taken him and removed him from this country without due process. Claimed he was a member of the MS-13 gang as a way to try to justify not giving him due process, as if there is any justifiable reason to not giving somebody due process. But yeah, some people don't want to talk about that.
Okay, let's talk about that. First of all, in her little analogy, why is Jesus is in America? It's 2025. And Jesus is just deported by this administration because Trump would have said he's a member of the MS-13 gang. First of all, why? Why was Jesus deported? Why was Jesus here illegally? Was Jesus in our country illegally to begin with? Does that seem to jibe with how you viewed Jesus the man functioning with society? I just read a story in the Gospels the other day as I did the Bible recap with Tara Lee Cobble, as I've talked about on this program a lot, and I encourage you to do it. It's totally free. It's 100% worth doing. But in one of the recent studies, one of the recent days of, it's a 365-day study. Jesus healed 10 lepers. Jesus healed 10 lepers. It's interesting. It's fascinating. So much of this is fascinating. Obviously, I can just take one little component of this and share with you. But of the 10, first of all, the 10 left, the 10 were all healed. One of them came back to thank Jesus, who, by the way, Jesus says was a Samaritan. Now, again, without getting too much into this and deviating too much from the narrative of what I want to talk about here today, Samaritans were looked down upon at the time of Jesus. Samaritans were looked down upon by the Jewish people in general. I mean, you always have people who didn't look down on others, right? But in general, there was this air of condescension that said the Samaritans were kind of second-class people. And so Jesus, when he would tell his parables, or in this case, actually a healing, he would often point these things out. And he would add to the story of the Good Samaritan. You've probably heard this parable. Jesus said in a parable, there was a man who fell injured into a ditch and was in need of medical attention and help. And there were two people that walked by, or three people that walked by. The first was a member, I think a priest. The priest actually crossed to the other side of the road and didn't even, walked around the guy. The Levite, who of course is from the priesthood of the tribes of Israel as well. I don't know if he crossed to the other side, but he didn't help the man either. And then a Samaritan came along and helped the man. And what's interesting is Jesus is basically calling out the hypocrisy, because the religious leaders were in the midst of the people listening to the parable, and Jesus was just hammering down on these folks. Jesus didn't condone people treating people differently because of who they were, but that doesn't mean the law shouldn't apply. In fact, the reason I brought up the other parable, the parable of Jesus healing the 10 lepers, was because the one Samaritan who came back to thank Jesus, well, first of all, that adds, I guess, to the insult to the Jewish people, the Jewish leaders, I should say, not the Jewish leaders at the time. And so, because they were arrogant, Jesus was addressing their arrogance. That needs to be understood in this narrative. This was not the Jewish people as a whole. This was the Jewish leaders. They did not like that Jesus was challenging their authority. They didn't like that Jesus was undermining what they were saying and teaching. He called these folks whitewashed tombs. He called them a brood of vipers. He did not have good words for the Pharisees. These were people who were not interested in, they were interested in an outward appearance of holiness, but they were willing to do whatever it took to maintain that and to oppress the people and to maintain their own stature. Jesus talked about these being the people who want the seats of honor, who want the praise of men. These people who pray in public for the praise of it. He says, you've gotten your reward in full. Don't think that there's going to be some special reward for you in heaven because you were praying publicly. You were praying, nothing wrong with praying publicly, right? There's a problem with the condition of the heart. And so you've got your reward in full. If you prayed publicly so that people could say, good job, that was fantastic, that was beautiful. Well, there's your gift. There's your return on your investment. There's no eternal reward for that. But if you do things with the right motivation, God has rewards for his people who are faithful and obedient and have the right motivations. We all know. Listen, we know when we're motivated for the right reasons and for the wrong reasons and all of that. So, but what was interesting with the Jewish leaders, again, specifically, not the Jewish people, because, again, it's the condition of the heart. As with any group of people, you've got people who are who could be doing some bad things, and the Jewish leaders were doing some bad things. Even within that group of Jewish leaders, there were people who were pursuing Jesus. Nicodemus, for example, Joseph of Arimathea, both believed to be part of that group of Jewish leaders, but the majority of them, the outspoken ones, the ones who were dictating how Jesus would be treated and handled, were vicious, were evil, were wicked. They were not doing good things. And so that's a conflict that was happening when Jesus was speaking in public. He knew, in fact, he would say many times, my hour, my time has not yet come. Don't tell anybody about this, because he knew that if people in the Jewish leaders at the time, those who sought his life, if they had enough information about him, if they knew that he was speaking things that they considered blasphemy, he knew that there was going to be the possibility. Of course, it never would have happened because Jesus is in control. God is in control of what happens. He paused on many occasions attempts for the people who wanted to kill Jesus, to stone him, to throw him off of a mountain and so forth, off of a hill. But he didn't want, until the time was right, for all these things to kind of peak and culminate. And that's what they did. They peaked on Good Friday, and of course, on Easter Sunday, on Resurrection Sunday, more appropriately, Jesus rose from the grave, defeating sin and death once for all for everybody to see. The proof was in the pudding. Put your hands in my hands, feel my scars, see my side, he told to Thomas. And so the idea here that Jesus, who challenged the Pharisees, however, Jesus was also the fulfillment of the law. He said, I didn't come to abolish the law. I came to fulfill the law. Jesus was the law in flesh. He didn't come to abolish or to break it. He came to break the additional rules that the Pharisees, the religious leaders at the time, had set up to kind of, there's a term where they want to put a fence around the law. So to keep people from breaking the law, they would make another rule or a law, so to speak. It wasn't a law from God, but a rule that says you can't cross this fence. This law keeps you from breaking this law. And Jesus challenged that on a regular basis, often healing on the Sabbath, challenging their belief that what God was really after on the Sabbath, what he established the Sabbath. And so there was this conflict. But Jesus was the fulfillment of the law. And when he healed those 10 lepers, and the one came back, but when he healed those 10 lepers, you know what he told them to do? Go show yourself to the priests. Why did he do that? Because that was the law. That was the law. And I say all of this to say, she wants to paint Jesus as what? Someone who has broken the law to enter America? Or is she claiming that if Jesus was a legal resident, an American citizen, in her little analogy here, he would be deported for what? For being associated with the gang. Well, what would Jesus have been doing to be associated with the gang? Again, this individual, this Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who the person with whom Senator Chris Van Hollen had some margaritas with. Did you see those pictures? The stage photo didn't show the margarita glasses, but there's another picture that's out there showing that they were sipping margaritas in El Salvador. This is unbelievable. It's not, but it is. And so what is she trying to say here? That, this individual, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who has been, we went through some of the stuff last week. We went through the claims of abuse that were filed by his wife. We went through the evidence to suggest he was a member of the MS-13 gang. He doesn't need due process for being tied to the gang. That is just that little detail is just get you to the front of the line for deportations. That's not due process. The due process for whatever the process is for the deportation, that applies to him. His being alleged to be an MS-13 gang member has no relevance here because the Trump administration is simply using that to say who's going to be first, who we're going to target first with deportations. We're not going to criminally charge all these people, go through a court process, and then deport them. We're looking at people who aren't supposed to be here, then we're deporting them, starting with those who seem to be the most likely to be engaging in violence. And not just we're making it up on the spot. There are people who, Kilmar Abrego Garcia has MS-13 tattooed right across his knuckles. If you're watching the camera in the studio, right here, right across his knuckles. He's got MS-13. Is that just a coincidence that he picked random letters here? Is that referencing something else? What in the world? I mean, Again, he had a deportation order. He was also not supposed to be deported to El Salvador, which I shared on this program constantly. But the truth is, he was eligible to be deported. He was not an American citizen. What are they talking about? Lack of due process rights, and better yet, talking about Jesus, the Messiah. Why would you say Jesus would be deported? What evidence would there have been? What reason would there have been for the Trump administration to say that he was connected to MS-13? So in order for him to get deported, Jesus would have had to have been here illegally, which he is the fulfillment of the law. And I'm not saying American law is biblical law. I'm simply saying Jesus respected the law in general, civil law. He didn't come to really address any of that. He came to address the penalty of our sin. He came as the sacrificial lamb for the forgiveness. He offered forgiveness and salvation from our sins. He came to save his people from their sins. Why would he have been in this country illegally? Why would he have been associating? You know what he would have been doing? He probably would have been talking with the gang members. He did a lot. That's one of the things they didn't like about Jesus when he was here on planet Earth. He got a lot of flack for sitting down and talking with the tax collectors and sinners. We learned that from the scripture. Jesus would have certainly been ministering to every person who needed to repent of his or her sin, but he wouldn't have been he wouldn't have been breaking the law, and he wouldn't have been engaging in behavior that would have made people say he was a gang member. It's simply not the case. That's what she claims here, though. That's what she claims. I feel like I stopped that. I feel like it continued on because I stopped this. Hell, hold on here. Let me re-cue this. Some people don't want to talk about that, she says. She continues, though, picking up in, again, this is Tim Walz's daughter telling us how
it truly is baffling.
I guess Jesus would have been deported in this country. So she says it's truly baffling. Here she goes.
How clear and laid out everything is, and there is still people standing by it. I believe in the good of people and like humanity.
Okay, pause. Let me go back to that. She says it's so clear there's never a reason to violate due process. People are still standing beside what Trump is doing. Due process is 100. Let me ask you this, Tim Walz's daughter. Were you in favor of the way that the January 6ers were treated by law enforcement, the courts? Or were you happy with that? Were you happy with the way that Trump was treated by the law and the courts, given the charges he had faced and so forth? Because those are actual examples of how, especially the J6ers, due process was not afforded. They were mistreated in many, many ways. Whether guilty or not, where's she on this one? People should, when charged criminally in this country, be given due process. They should be given the process by which they can defend themselves and prevent themselves from being sent to prison or whatever, from facing whatever penalties, financial penalties or whatever. They should be given that. We all should be given that. I agree with that. But that is not what's happening here. That is not what's happening here. They have been given due process for the deportation portion of this. What they've not been given due process for is the allegations of being tied to a criminal gang. They don't need to be given that because they're not being charged with any crimes that would require them to be given due process to give a defense against that. They are here illegally. That is it. She doesn't know what she's talking about when you get down to it. Now, she also says here, which I addressed at the end of last segment, I'm going to do it briefly again for those of you who missed it in the time we have available this segment, but she also makes a claim here that needs to be addressed regarding her viewpoint on the nature of humanity. Here it is.
I believe in the good of people and like humanity, humans, deep down at our core, like we care about each other. But that's really being tested because how anyone is okay with this is terrifying to me. But yeah, if you look like me, speak up, speak out, because we might be the only ones safe from what's coming and some of the only people that are able to stop it. So, yeah, it's our duty at this point.
Just abruptly stops. So, she says that she believes in the good of humanity, which again, as I addressed at the end of last segment, Jesus would 100% disagree with that. The Bible says there's no one good, no, not one. Jesus came specifically to die for the sins, the failures, the faults, the rebellion of humanity. Jesus came for us in spite of us. Jesus didn't come for us because we were good enough but just didn't quite hit the mark. We are filthy in comparison to God. We are full of sin. We need to be, that sin needs to be atoned for. It was atoned for on the cross that Jesus hanged upon 2,000 years ago. She can believe deep down all she wants in the goodness of humanity. There's been many communist empires that have crumbled, watching millions of their own citizens be slaughtered and butchered and tortured and enslaved and imprisoned because they believe such lies. In fact, I was told the reason that communism failed, I remember this in college. The reason communism failed, I was told, was because the benevolent dictator hadn't arrived yet. That's right. There was it wasn't because of the system. They just didn't quite find the right people. Isn't it funny how we're always looking for a better person to fix communism? Because, well, the truth is that person doesn't exist. Ironically, Jesus was the closest person, well, he was been the only person, the perfect person to institute whatever form of government should he have decided to do that. He would have been the one worthy of leading it, but because he's not a sinner like the rest of us, he is God incarnate. So she's really, really wrong here and really, really confused. And it's important that the message, the true message of the resurrection, of the life of Jesus, which again culminates on this. Jesus had great teachings and he wanted us to follow his words. I mean, God has spent a tremendous amount of time trying to tell us and teach us and instruct us on how he expects us to live. He did that throughout the Old Testament, trying to give the Israelites direction. He gave them direction. They just refused to believe it. Jesus has wonderful teachings. We should take his lessons and apply them to our lives immediately and fully. But the number one reason, the purpose, his mission for coming was to seek and to save that was lost, to save the sinners of the world, which includes all of us. And no, there is no one good, not even one. We all are in desperate need of a Savior. I have to take a time out, my friend. Sit tight, back here in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. So, played former vice presidential candidate Tim Walz's daughter, current governor of the great state of Minnesota. We played his daughter's comments last segment, talked about those for a moment. But they lead this inability to understand and be fair with what's going on with Kilmar, Abrego Garcia's deportation, and so forth. It's all over the place as far as what people are saying. Simone Sanders, who's someone we haven't talked about on this program for a long time, but she's going to be talked about here today. She's got a show on MSNBC. You probably never heard of it. You probably never watched it. But she's, again, a leftist on MSNBC. Those things are synonymous, of course. But she's got a group. She's got, Michael Steele, the former Republican chair, who's completely sold out to whatever MSNBC is peddling over there, along with Nicole Wallace as well, which, by the way, should illustrate and demonstrate just how much of a uniparty we've had operating in this country for a long time now. Separate, by the way, from the folks in the Trump administration, or at least the majority of the Trump administration. Maybe there's a couple of folks in there. Who knows? You just never know the real motivations of some people. But everybody's against the Trump administration, from both the establishment Republican class, like Michael Steele, and, of course, the radical leftists here, like Simone Sanders. She's got a representative on her program as well, and she's talking about the deportation of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, and she's wanting to explain or to make a point that say Black Americans, minorities, should be against this because they're next in line. That's what she says. None of this makes any sense, but again, I'm just going to play it. I'm just the messenger here. So here's Simone Sanders talking on her show, painting the picture, making the case that, well, that Black Americans and minorities are next in line if Kilmar Abrego Garcia is allowed to be deported. Here you go.
I've been talking about this all week, but Janae Nelson of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, she penned an op-ed in The Nation this week, and her op-ed talked about that we think that democracies are... the way they die is dramatically through these wars and blood is shed, and it's cinematic in a sense. But really, the realistic way in which democracies die is that it's dismantled brick by brick, piece by piece. And
that's right. It has, and the irony here is that this is what people on your side of the aisle have been doing for decades now, dismantling our constitutional republic brick by brick, assaulting the liberties enshrined that were recognized in our Bill of Rights, in our Constitution, assaulting those, making up things out of whole cloth like the Roe versus Wade decision. Don't pretend like we're the ones assaulting this brick by brick. Now it's again, I don't want to have the whole democracy, constitutional republic thing because there are certainly democratic aspects of our government. You might call it a constitutional democracy. It's more appropriately, I believe, a constitutional republic. But it's not a pure democracy. And there's a reason for that, right? It's not just a technicality that says every person doesn't vote on every issue. It's also because we took the time, we have a constitution that says no matter what the majority says, the smallest minority, which is the individual, has these rights, and you cannot take them away. No matter how much you hate Elon Musk, you cannot take his rights away because those rights don't come from government. Those rights come from his creator. That's the point. And who's been assaulting that? Who's been taking that apart brick by brick over the past decades? It's not been Republicans. Well, it might have been some rhino Republicans, but it's been the Democrat Party and certainly the godless radical left. She continues here.
That what we are seeing now with the lawlessness from this administration are really the canaries in the coal mine gasping for air. I'm paraphrasing here. But to me, that is why Kilmar Abrego Garcia's specific case, the case of the gentleman who's a makeup artist out of California who was also sent to that prison, that is why the 75% of the folks who have been sent, the men who have been sent there that don't have criminal records, that is why this is so important. Because if they could do it to them, if they could snatch students off the street without any pushback or recourse, they will do it to any of us. And to be very clear, it's going to be the people of color and vulnerable communities that are next in line.
Okay, pause. Pause all of this. Is she claiming, Simone Sanders, are you claiming that because the Trump administration deported Kilmar Abrego Garcia, claiming he's a member of the MS-13 gang, which, again, on one level is completely irrelevant to this discussion because he was given a deportation order. Now, again, to fill in the full story, he was given an order, a withholding order to not be sent to El Salvador, which is where he was sent. But there's a little bit more to that. Again, the reason that he was not allowed to go there, when the judge said he couldn't be sent there, was because that was a place where he would allegedly, ostensibly, listening to Kilmar Garcia, be at risk of losing his life or his life being in great jeopardy because of rival gangs. So is he a member of a gang or is he not a member of a gang? He's a citizen of the country, and it would seem, at least on some level, that if you're given a deportation order, being sent to your home country seems to make the most sense. I'm not saying there's not instances where that shouldn't be the case, but I'm saying this idea that this guy was here illegally, clearly. They call him a Maryland man. They call him a Maryland father. They don't want you to call him a gang member or anything like that because he's not gone through the due process of being charged criminally for any association or crimes committed while being an alleged member of MS-13. That's not what this is about. That's just who gets priority. The due process for deportation has been granted over the course of these years now. Whether the Kilmar Garcia actually was playing a game to try to find a way to keep from being deported or not, it's undeniable that some people make some sort of claim that their life's in jeopardy in order to stay. What is so hard? Of course there's going to be. There's incentive. Look, it could be totally legitimate and real that his life was in jeopardy if he went back to El Salvador. It could also be totally possible that he was making it up because it was a way to stay in this country. And if he was making it up, it worked for 6 years. So, again, how does this compute? What's the connection to people who are minorities and the people who are of color in the cities and walking the streets of America? If you're a legal American citizen, you're not going to be deported. Is that what you're insinuating, Simone Sanders? This is irresponsible at best, completely deceptive at worst. This is not the way. Why would they be at risk? Now, if you're a person who's here illegally and you're a person of color, then yeah, you should be worried. If you're a person here illegally and you're a person who's not of color, whatever that's supposed to mean in today's world, fine. If you're a white guy and you're here illegally, you should have something to be concerned about. That's why Trump is looking for self-deportations. Look, if you are here, if you get out of this country, I shared this story a couple of weeks ago. If you're here in this country illegally, right now people are paying coyotes, people who smuggle humans across the border to get them into America. They're now asking them to smuggle them out of America because they don't want to have any actual arrest and deportation connected with them because they won't be able to get back in here. They're trying to get out undetected so they can sneak back in to this country, right? And so that applies to all people. Whatever your race, if you're not here legally, then you should be concerned with deportation. That should have always been the case, 100%. In fact, it was such the opposite not the case when Biden was in office. You could have been here illegally and in the committing egregious, wicked, reprehensible, illegal, and violent acts and have no concern even at that point of being deported. That's all been flipped on its head. The idea, though, that someone is now more likely, if they're a minority, to be deported because of Kilmar Garcia is nothing short of utter nonsense. But then again, that's what we've come to expect on MSNBC. Friends, before I jump off here this segment, let me remind you, Freedom Marketplace, that's where you can go to find businesses that are pushing in the same direction that you are. These businesses love America. They love these things that America was founded upon. They revere the Constitution. They're patriotic. They push in the same direction you are. They are opposing woke candidates and woke causes. These businesses are here to provide services to you at no cost. Well, you have to pay them, but it's no cost to go to the directory. freedommarketplace.net is where you can go to find out more about these businesses that are good, patriotic businesses pushing in the same direction you are. Check it out today, freedommarketplace.net. Liberty and business for all, my friends. Quick time out. Back here in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Third and final segment of today's program. I know time flies when you're having fun here. Friends, before I move on to the other part of this soundbite that I want to play, Representative Ivey from Maryland was responding to those ridiculous comments I just played for you at the previous segment from Simone Sanders. Before I do that, my friends, let me remind you, if you're concerned about staying healthy as you age, if you have a history of high cholesterol, heart problems in your family, consider taking Solti. It's an all-natural supplement that has been scientifically proven to lower your cholesterol. It's good for your heart. It's all natural. It's not a drug. There's no doctor's visits, none of that stuff. Just an all-natural supplement. All you have to do is take 2 Salty soft gels a day, and they're very manageable. They're not big pills. I take this product. I think you should consider taking it as well. Salty.com is the website, S-O-L-T-E-A, Salty.com, S-O-L-T-E-A. Promo code Todd will get you 50% off your first 3-month supply and free shipping. The only thing you have to lose is high cholesterol points, my friend. So, Salty.com, S-O-L-T-E-A, promo code Todd. Check it out today. All right, I want to play the rest of this clip. The rest of this clip from this MSNBC soundbite. Again, I played for you what Simone Sanders said. She's sitting down. There's a table of 3 of them. One of those individuals at the table is Michael Steele, the former chair of the Republican Party back in the Bush era. And the other is Representative Glenn Ivey from Maryland, who wants to chime in on this and say, yeah, you got it right, Simone. You've got this exactly right. People of color should be concerned. Just listen to this nonsense.
That's certainly part of why the African-American community is so strongly behind the supporting Killmonger.
Yeah, we're like, we are not for this.
Yeah, because as you just said, if they're going to whisk them away, what are they going to do with us? But the other point, too, though, is...
If they're going to whisk them away, what are they going to do to us? It's just, he just says this as though this is the pinnacle of irresponsibility, Representative Glenn Ivey. If we're just going to whisk away Kilmar Garcia, who happens to be Hispanic, which really has no relevance to any of this. None of this. The only thing that's relevant is his immigration status and his, you can say, because of this whole, the way that Trump is doing it, his alleged connection with MS-13, with which he's got tattoos of the gang's name on his fist, on his knuckles, my friends, which I've held up to the camera there. Maybe I won't do that. Anyway, but the point is, what do you mean maybe we're next in line? What does this mean? What in the world is going on? Listen, if you're a minority voter out there and you're listening to this, please, listen, I'm not asking you to become a complete, fully engaged supporter of Trump or anything like that. Just please stop letting these people scare, and maybe you don't. I know that, but if you're a scared minority voter, if you find yourself voting for these Democrats because they've gotten you scared of voting for a Republican, this is unacceptable. There's not going to be a single instance of an American citizen, black person, who is deported. I can't even believe I'm saying this. Let me say this, if it does happen, you're going to have people like me and countless others that are screaming for this to be reversed. But it is so preposterous, this has nothing to do with it. If they're here legally, if there is a black person who is here illegally, they very well might be deported. But that's not the message here. The message seems to be, to a casual observer here, behind the microphone, it seems to be that she's saying, Simone Sanders and now Representative Glenn Ivey from Maryland, someone who's actually sitting in Congress, who has decided he wants to deceive his constituents, who has decided he wants to lie and make up stories about who's at risk and what they're at risk of because Trump is in the White House. If you are an American citizen and you are black, this is not going to have any impact on you personally. 0%. And Glenn Ivey knows that. By the way, I didn't have time to get into this today, but Politico had a piece about this whole Chris Van Hollen going down to have sip some margaritas with Kilmar Abrego Garcia and to live it up a little bit, to get the photo op in El Salvador. It said something that the subtitle of the piece made some reference to defending his constituent. He's not his constituent. What in the world is going on here? A constituent is someone who you represent. he is here illegally. First of all, you can't get his vote unless they're admitting to that now, that you can vote, I guess. A constituent is someone who you can earn their support. You can earn their vote. You're in their district or whatever. They're in your district. They can vote for you. They're in your state and they can vote for you. He's not a constituent. He is an illegal alien who should have been deported years ago. The only thing that stopped him was this claim that there was a threat upon his life from rival gangs in El Salvador. I mean, it's remarkable, really, to me, what these folks are able to get away with. Anyway, I'm out of time here. Running long here. Well, just run out of time, I guess. Got to wrap it up. Have a wonderful day, my friends. Thank you so much for listening, STG.